Well, good morning. It's a beautiful Tuesday, 14th of July. It's actually relatively comfortable, although the weathermen say we're going to start getting a heat wave, which is going to make me miserable. Okay. Currently, our classroom, we're reading Brian's Winter, which, it's kind of ironic that we're in the middle of July and the weathermen are predicting we're going to start having a bit of a heat wave for the next 10 days or so. And we're reading about a young boy who, our fictional character, Brian Robeson, who has to survive a Canadian winter. And Gary Paulson, in his writings, goes through all the details what this young man had to do. All right. I know we read about, I know in our classroom we've read Hatchet, and then we have read The River. And in the case of Brian's Winter, it's someone... Gary Paulson had this idea. What if Brian had not been rescued? What if he had to endure a Canadian winter? And, our fictional character, Brian Robeson, is facing all kinds of issues, and he's overcoming the odds. And I was asking some of the staff and people I work with, I says, hey, I need some ideas for, a short video, and what do you suggest? And they talked about poisonous plants. Now, our fictional character, Brian Robeson, doesn't have to worry about that right now. In fact, in that part of Canada, he really doesn't have too many poisonous plants to deal with. But there is one poisonous plant that many of us have to deal with in the New England area, as well as, and it's found in all states except Alaska, and that's poison ivy. And you probably wonder, one of the biggest things is, what does poison ivy look like? Well, this is what it looks like, all right? Right here. I'm just using this piece of grass as like a pointer. I don't want to touch it. This is what poison ivy looks like. It can grow as it can grow in the ground as like a low growing shrub, or it can actually grow as a vine going up a tree. In this case here, what we have is this low growing shrub, and it has the distinctive 3 leaves. So when you see this, and it's somewhat not too shiny, of course there's a lot of morning dew, this is the distinctive signature, the 3 leaves. The 3 leaves indicate that it's a poisonous plant. Now, not all plants that have 3 leaves are poisonous, but in this case here, this here is a very toxic plant. It contains an oil called urushiol, and it's a universal irritant. What happens is that it gets on your skin, and then it causes what is called contact dermatitis. And so this plant here, and again, a lot of people don't realize what it looks like. And it's growing in quite a big patch right here. All right. They have a lot of small seeds, and they can, it's very, very, what is called prolific. Okay. So this type of plant, if I were to touch it with my bare skin, unless I wash that off quickly, chances are I'm going to catch poison ivy. I'm going to get contact dermatitis. Now, I know some people are going to say, I'm allergic. I'm not allergic to it. I'm immune to it. Now, technically, nobody is. It's just that the certain conditions, you might have sweated and washed away the oil. You may have... didn't get in sufficient contact with it. I've actually pulled up roots out of the ground, and then I caught it really bad. All right, because one of the ways to get rid of it is you have to really, I don't like using toxic chemicals like glycophosphate to get rid of it, but that's one of the things that you have to do is put on some gloves and pull it up. Well, I guess I decided to do something stupid one day and use my bare hands, and then I really got bad poison ivy. All right, so because the oil's got embedded in my skin, and that's what makes it toxic. So again, this is what poison ivy looks like. All right, I want you to burn that into your mind, so to speak, so that when you're walking out and about, you know not to play around or touch it, because then it could be a very unpleasant experience. And again, you can see that it has a tendency to spread. It's like 20 or 30 feet along the edge of this field over here. Okay. And while I'm at it, might as well talk a little bit about other things. Okay. Now, here we have some bittersweet. Okay. This is actually an invasive plant. it grows all over the place. And then over here we got, right inside there, we actually have some wild rose. It's really not a wild rose, but it's actually roses that they were planted years ago by farmers. And what ended up happening is that they just grew in the wild. So you could say they're kind of like a feral rose, for lack of a better term. What ends up happening is that they tend to choke off areas, you know. Oh. And see, I'm hoping to walk around here and we can find some poison ivy vines. All right, just want to show the you know, how the two types of poison, well, it's actually the same type of poison ivy. And speaking of which, here it is. Okay, here we have poison ivy in the shape of a vine. All right, we can see the 3 leaves, and we can see the branches, and then you can see this big hairy vine growing up from the ground, and it's growing up to the top of this particular tree here. Okay, so now we know what the 2 main types of poison ivy look like. Again, it's the same plant, it's just that it has the ability to grow as a vine or along the ground. If it grows along the ground, then all of a sudden it comes up to a tree, it may actually start growing upwards, and then it's kind of like the stem turns into a big vine, for lack of a better term. Now, all parts of this plant have the urushiol oil, and you can get contact dermatitis from it. So again, this is something that you don't want to play with. Most of the time that people get it, they do it by when they're doing some landscaping, or, you know, some people might go out into the woods and play around, and you know, they'll accidentally, I've accidentally touched it. You know, you guys know that I like to hunt, and especially I bow hunt. More than once, I've actually, you know, grabbed it while I was setting up a tree stand or something. So now I'm very, very careful where, okay, if, like, I'm going to be honest, this is a little deer run over here. All right. If I were to hunt deer here, I would put a tree stand. I wouldn't use any of this. Obviously this tree is too crooked, but if this was a nice straight tree and it had this vine growing on it, I would look for another one, because I don't want to run the risk of getting that contact dermatitis on my hands or anywhere else in my body, because it can also go into your clothing, and all of a sudden, you know, you touch your clothing later on. Again, it's called urushiol oil. It's an oil, and it can spread. So if you do happen to come in contact with it, your best bet is actually to just, deer flies are really friendly this year. Fortunately, you know, I already got bit a couple times, which is not fun. One of the things that you have to do is this, again, you have to thoroughly wash it with cold, soapy water. You know, rinse it off with cold water, and then, you know, lather up with some, you know, plain soap, and then again cold water. Hot water will open up your pores, and the oil could get inside your pores and make the contact dermatitis even worse. Okay. Now, in the wild, if you happen to get this, there's not much you can kind of do about it. Now, there is a plant, and ironically, it tends to grow near poison ivy. It's, you know, it's the, it's called jewel weed. Okay, and this is some of it right here. I've seen where some deer have been eaten. All right, we can see that was cut off there. A deer ate that. This particular plant here, all right, see how it's kind of slimy? You could put that slime, kind of smells like, it actually smells like carrot. You can put that slime on the you know, your rash, and it can help. But it's like I said, it's going to be a painful experience, at least for most people. Like I said, there are some people that are a little less affected, but all human beings are affected by urushiol oils. Now, somebody asked about poison oak and poison sumac. Well, I'm going to be brutally honest. I have yet to see any poison oak or poison sumac in the New England area. Now, I do know that it, you know, people tell me that it does exist, but I've never seen it. From my understanding, it's more prevalent like New Jersey and southward. Now, I've been out in the woods in the deep south, but again, in the deep south, I've never seen it myself in the places I've gone in the woods anyways. So I'm hoping, and we're loaded with jewelweed all around here, okay? So generally speaking, if you have poison ivy, you're also going to have that jewelweed growing around, and that can provide you with a little bit of relief if you're in the wild and you happen to get poison ivy. So anyways, on that note, I'm going to bid you adieu, and I hope that this little bit of information I give you is helpful. All right? So if you're out in the wilds, take care, and remember the old saying, leaves of three, leave it be.